Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the DUI Guy Plus. Today, we are going to be reviewing the recent interview that the Bar Association of Beverly Hills has done for Camille Vasquez and Ben Chu. So, without further ado, let's dive right in.
I know you've all been waiting for it. This is Lunch with Johnny Depp's attorneys, Benjamin Chu and
Lunch with
Camille
them.
Vasquez, hosted by the president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, Anthony Ross. I hope you all enjoy today's program, and over to you, Anthony.
Thank you, Chelsea, for not only a wonderful introduction, but for reminding me of the wonderful support of our members, and also the importance of Beverly Hills Bar Association in helping to support the next generation of attorneys. Now, whether you're watching us on Zoom or on YouTube, welcome. Welcome to Lunch with Johnny Depp's attorneys, Benjamin Chu and Camille Vasquez. I'm Tony Ross, president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I'm very grateful for that today's guests could join us. And so thank you both. I am just going to launch right in. We have not much time, so I just want to get as much as we can get. First person I think I will ask Ben. Ben, when you got into litigation, did you ever think that you would be representing A-list celebrities, or was that really your goal to do entertainment law?
Tony, first, thank you very much for hosting Camille and me. It's a great honor to appear with you and before your wonderful members. No, I have to be honest and say it was neither my expectation nor my aspiration to represent A-list celebrities. I was just someone who was very interested in litigation, and I just fortunately had the opportunity to represent. First, I represented Cher, and then I had the opportunity to represent Johnny.
Oh, wow. I actually had no idea that he represented Cher. But of course, I mean, the answer is kind of obvious. No lawyer is, when they start their career, is prepared for the fact that one day you're going to be representing A-list celebrities. I mean, that kind of goes without saying.
Which has been a great honor and a pleasure.
When you represented Cher, what was that first meeting like?
The first meeting was a little bit nervous-making. It actually was not a direct representation of her, but a representation of a pro bono client in Virginia.
Wow.
It later became the subject of a documentary called Edith and Eddie. It was a love story of an elderly couple.
Not familiar.
Cher had heard about this couple on the news. Ironically, she heard about it on the Los Angeles news, but it was a couple who lived right outside of Washington. And one of them needed legal representation. And through a friend, she contacted me, and I agreed to, of course, do it pro bono. And that was a very rewarding representation.
Okay, now that is brilliant. You see, when he gets the possibility of representing someone that Cher knows, he's like, holy fuck, this is completely ripe with the ability to get my name on the map, get my name out there. And he takes it pro bono. Pro bono, of course, for those of you unfamiliar, is taking a case for free. Absolutely brilliant PR move by Ben Chu right there.
Wow, nice. Camille, can you tell me how life has changed since you've taken this case?
How has your life changed, Camille?
Well, I think life has really changed.
But
some things have remained the same, right? I mean, I'm obviously very close to my family. I enjoy doing legal work, good legal work. I enjoy working with my colleagues and especially Ben, obviously. But life has become a little less private, a bit more, I feel like there's parts of my life now that I have a responsibility to share with fans or people, especially young women that have come forward.
Did you hear what she said? She didn't even call them, I mean, I don't even know what to call them, honestly, but she's right. I mean, what else do you call them? Fans. Like, she's got pretty much, according to at least one article I remember, she's got a quote unquote cult following, which is not surprising. She is very stern. She is brutal in the courtroom. She's got good looks. She's got skill. She's got personality. She's got, I mean, she is literally like the trifecta. And she's an inspiration to not only women everywhere, but to also women attorneys everywhere, despite what Michelle Dauber may say about her. I think her ability to litigate in a courtroom and to cross-examine a very, very contentious witness, i.e., Amber Heard. I mean, she was literally the most what's the word I'm looking for? Not, well, contentious is, it works here, but adverse. Thank you, brain. She's the most adverse witness that I think the world has ever seen. I mean, there are a few others I could think. I remember the deposition of who was it? Was it Lil Wayne? Not Lil Wayne. Oh my goodness, maybe it was Lil Wayne. Somebody in the chat help me out. He was just like, it was like a 6 to 8 minute clip of this rapper's deposition, and he just completely slaughtered the attorney on the other side. I legitimately just can't remember who it was, and chat will help me out in just a few seconds here, I'm sure. But that one, I mean, short of that, that was when the contentious adverse witness actually destroyed the lawyer. In this case, of course, it was Camille Vasquez who destroyed the witness and left nothing but a wet spot. Lil Wayne. It was Lil Wayne. It wasn't R. Kelly. No. It was Lil Wayne. Okay, so my brain was on the right track. If you haven't seen it, we're not going to watch it right now, but if you have not seen it, holy crap, it is worth the watch. So check it out after this video.
And said, thank you for being an inspiration, and thanks for getting me through a hard time or pushing me to go back to school. And I feel a huge sense of responsibility to them, and to continue doing good work and be a source of inspiration for them.
When did you know, Camille, when did you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I mean, I feel like the decision was sort of made for me. I joke.
Really?
I come from a Hispanic background. My mom is Cuban, my father is Colombian, and they said to my sister and me as we grew up that we were going to be professionals, right? That they weren't going to leave us with a lot, but our educations.
I love it.
And so they said, you get to be a doctor or a lawyer, so pick one. And
sounds like a Jewish family. I mean,
became the lawyer.
Holy shit. This is literally what every up and coming Jewish boy and girl from a good Jewish family gets told. You have two choices, doctor or lawyer, pick one. It can be anyone. Don't like the sight of blood, become a lawyer. Can't put two words together, become a doctor. I mean, this is literally the playbook. I had no idea that she was experiencing the same in her childhood. This is phenomenal. I love this.
But I wasn't particularly great at math and science, and like a lot of lawyers that are afraid
Same
of
for
Excel
Asian
spreadsheets
families.
or math. Right. I felt like the arts and
Yep.
the liberal arts were much more in my wheelhouse. So I probably really started thinking about it seriously in high school.
Yeah, I'm one of those who can't do math and science either. And yeah, that's why I think I ended up, although I love it as well.
Yes.
Ben, Camille just made me think of something. She mentioned that, the arts, and they often say that a lot of what we do, trial lawyers in particular, is you're putting on a show. Ben, do you agree with that? And do you have examples of how you do that?
I completely agree with you on that, Tony. And one of the things in planning this trial, which ended up being quite a long trial, at least by Virginia standards, of 6 weeks, we thought that we needed to not so much entertain the jury, but to tell them a compelling story. So we gave a lot of thought. And again, I give Camille and others on the team primary credit for this. They were thinking thematically and how best to put the story in a compelling way. And I think one thing that we decided early on was to kind of begin at the beginning, to tell something about Johnny's story, to tell them enough about his life growing up that they could better put into context his story about the events at issue in the case, because they really had a bearing. His background had a real bearing on how he reacted to things that happened in his relationship with Ms. Heard.
That makes sense.
And I think we were able to, the witnesses were really able to kind of set the table. So by the time that Mr. Depp started speaking, I think the jury was prepared to understand the context.
And by the way, speaking of context and storytelling, if y'all remember in the closing arguments, comparing Camille and Ben's interview on the one hand, Ben and Camille's closing and Ben Rottenborn and Elaine Bredehoft's closing, I mean, it was like night and day. Like, Ben and Camille told a story. It had a beginning, it had a middle, it had an end, it had punchlines, it had highs and lows. It was very cogent, coherent, fluid, comprehensive, cohesive. You know, it had all of these elements as to how it flowed. It almost like kind of rolled off the tongue, if you remember. If not, you know, go back and rewatch. They're not very long. They're all, I believe, combined, they're only about like an hour and a half. So not very long, relatively speaking, of course, is what I mean. The judge only allotted about 90 minutes per side, 3 hours total. Whereas like Ben Rottenborn's and Elaine Bertahoff's closing was so jagged and disjointed and very rough, and there was no cohesiveness, there was no fluidity. It didn't roll off the tongue. It was kind of like, okay, let's talk about this. Oh, do you guys remember this one instant? Let's talk about this one instant that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but we believe it does. And that's why the jury, like, I remember me watching, I wasn't in the courtroom on that day, if y'all remember. And my eyes literally glazed over. I was on Nick Rekieta's channel, and everybody, it was like me, Free Book, Nick, and what's his name from Kuwait? I forget his channel name, but anyway, the four of us were literally sitting there looking at each other, going, "What are they babbling about? What are they babbling? What are they saying? Where are they going with this whole closing argument?" We couldn't figure it out. We couldn't understand it. It was so just all over the place. There was no organization. And see what Ben said there, our goal, we came into this case thinking, look, we are going to have a story. We're going to paint a story, starting with the opening, starting with our witnesses, because they put on their case first, and they put Johnny on to tell his story, his childhood story. So fascinating strategy. Absolutely fascinating.
Got it. I guess I'll throw this one to Camille. I often say that movies and television do us
I literally
a
thought the
disservice,
exact same thing, John.
because they make
I was like, is this
trials,
Obama?
look like they happen in 2 or 3 days, and everything happens quickly.
Yes, it was legal
This was
vices.
a long
Thank you,
trial.
Morpheus.
Do you think, Camille, that it was instructive for the layman who was watching? Do you think that cameras in the courtroom, for example, are help?
I think so.
I think they definitely can be, right? I mean, it's another factor that we as trial lawyers have to consider when preparing the case. But I think it's definitely instructive and educational. I've had a lot of people have approached and said, I now know what lawyers do, and I know what you do. I know I've had also people say, parents that are lawyers say, oh, my kids finally sort of understand what I do. They've asked like, hey, Dad, what's objection hearsay mean? Or what's objection relevance mean?
Right.
And I think because of the trial, people took a real interest in what we were saying and what was happening and why the court was ruling in certain ways. And I think it was a crash course in what trial lawyers really do for a living.
Thank you. I agree with you. Let's see. It doesn't matter who answers this question. I'm just curious. So I recognize, social media became a thing. It really around this case. And it's happened before.
You think?
It really just becomes a force unto itself. Did that so much attention on social media. Did that make you pivot the strategy at all? Did it have any effect on how you guys were,
Yeah.
approaching the case?
No, I mean, I don't think so. We really
Really?
lived in a bubble during the trial,
Okay,
and
fair.
you know, we have no reason to believe the jury acted in the same exact way, right? I mean, we had a job to do. We had very little time to do much of anything but
I'm
work.
confused.
And that time that we did have, it was to sleep. I do think though that,
Well, that's
you know, we
fair.
started
Okay.
noticing.
I'm sorry. Okay. So I was confused by her answer because at first I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Then she threw the jury in there, which I think is kind of offside, but I see why she's doing it. She doesn't want to give the impropriety that the jury's done their own like independent research when they're not supposed to, which they didn't. But the question was directed at her. The question was, did you, Camille, have a chance to like have well, and I get that. Maybe she's right. I believe it. Maybe they didn't have direct, like her and Ben did not have like direct contact in the social media realm, but I'm pretty sure that they had like people on their team responsible for that. So just to make sure that they at least fish for information because that's essential on especially such a publicized trial. I mean, you literally have a free jury is the way I like to look at it. You have a free jury of like, let's call it, I don't know, 6 million people, possibly more at any given moment interacting on the internet. I mean, I think they would be remiss not to at least see how the public is reacting to it and to things. But no question, it's not an easy job, and of course, like she said, it was work and sleep. I don't blame her. That I believe 100%.
Seeing that this was kind of taking on a life of its own, probably midway through the trial, I went, our hotel was attached to a mall, and I went to grab a coffee one morning over the weekend, and this sweet young girl with like braces, you know, said my name and then handed me my coffee, and she looked at me and she went like this in like the cutest way. And I thought, oh God, do I have something like on my face? And then she said, "You're Johnny Depp's lawyer." And I was like, how do you know that? So, but no, it really didn't play a role in our strategy at all. I mean, obviously the fact that there were cameras in the courtroom, that was something that we knew. But I don't even think that played much of a role, at least in how we did our jobs. I don't
Okay,
know
that
if
makes
Ben feels
sense.
differently.
I agree with that. I understand.
No, I feel the same way, and I was mortally afraid of hearing the
yes.
critique of any of my performances, so I stayed away from it. And after a couple of weeks, it's not that we forgot them, but we really
You got used to them.
As you know, Tony, as a trial lawyer, you just don't have time for a lot of things other than what you have to do. So we just kind of moved ahead.
So now that you know, now we've had this example, right? So in the future, you know, for your next high profile case, do you think it will that color any way that your strategy is created, do you think?
I'm sure. Oh yes. They've learned from their
Ben,
experience.
do you want to take this one?
Sure. I think if we knew in advance we'd have another televised trial, I think we would do. I mean, obviously, we would always do things differently because we could always have done certain things better.
Sure, naturally.
But I think the approach to try to do it thematically and to try to tell a story is something that we would probably do again.
100%.
I would just hope that we had the same team.
Just as
Right.
Just as a quick aside, I paused it literally. I needed to wait one more second. Storytelling is the absolute best way for not just attorneys, but pretty much anybody to get their point across. There's actually this book. It's called Storytelling for Lawyers. Now, it's funny. I have not read it. I probably should, but maybe at this point in my career, I feel like I don't need it. And let me tell you why. Although I will eventually read. Of course, I need it. What am I saying? My head is getting too big for my shoulders. Storytelling is how generations of people have passed on information for literally millennia, right? Think about it. Before books, before papyrus was around, you know, before people etched things in stone, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, People would, even back then, they would write, their stories in caves in the form of pictures. So storytelling, and you could see, like there's a stick figure with a spear, and then there's an animal in the next frame, and then there's a dead animal with a spear through its back or whatever. That's a story. You're literally watching a cave painting story. So storytelling has existed as long as man had consciousness, right? So the ability to tell your client's story from the perspective of a layperson is the best way to, because if you start talking about like throwing in legal terms and using big words and trying to look like the smartest person in the room, the jury will look at you and go, and I don't understand what you're trying to put across. Can you speak to me in language that I understand? And Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez are experts at telling the story of their plaintiff, their client, the individual that is trying to get his life back. In this case, Johnny Depp. So absolutely fantastic. Best strategy out there for plaintiffs. And Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez are definitely masters of it, no question.
Speaking of that, how do you pick your team? What criteria did you use to pick your team?
Well, I'll start out because Camille chose a lot of the other members of the team. But when this case started out, it was just a core of Camille, myself, and another attorney. My rule on this case was that anybody who worked on this case had to be materially smarter than me, which is a fairly low
strategy.
Bar, and they all cleared that bar. But beyond that, we really chose people with whom we not only respected as lawyers, but whom we respected as people. In other words, people we could get along with, people who had high character, who had a sense of humor, because we knew this was going to be extremely difficult. And although we each brought our own different perspectives to it, and we tried to have some doubters among us, and we did. We had two we called Eeyore because they constantly told us we had no chance to win until about the middle of the trial. We did think it was important that the people who worked on this case believed Johnny, because we fervently believed him, or we would not have recommended that he file this case. As you know, Tony, defamation cases are inherently difficult. Truth is a defense. So, I mean, obviously, all of us do due diligence before we file any complaint for Rule 11 and other reasons. But defamation cases, as you know, you have to be particularly careful. So by the time, Camille and I and a couple of the others who were on at the beginning, we were true believers in the sense that we'd really looked at all the evidence and we'd done a lot of hard digging. And it was important for us to have others who were of like mind and who were willing to, we knew even before we knew it's televised, there might be some criticism. We were kind of running against the tide of Me Too, which, by the way, all of us, including Johnny, support. And we also understand that the vast majority of victims are telling the truth. But as Camille likes to point out, and she'll say it more articulately than I do, there's also a notion of due process that we all have to remember.
Exactly.
Especially when, we're dealing with controversial subjects, that you have to just kind of wait. There's plenty of time to judge after the fact. So it was important for all of us, to be kind of like mind in terms of how we interacted with each other, and that we had a belief in the client.
Yep.
That's
exactly right.
Camille, did you want to add anything to that? How do you pick your strategy?
I mean, I think that I echo Ben's thoughts on this.
Her voice disappeared.
It's important to have a young team. I thought that we were dealing with
This is not me, you guys.
With young people, and I thought that in some way, as maybe as counterintuitive as this may sound, is I think sometimes less experience motivates people to really throw themselves into a case and over prepare and dig into the facts. And that's what happened in this case, right? And we gave opportunities to young lawyers that had never necessarily taken a witness before. And
I can barely, I mean, your sound went out a little bit, sorry.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
It's not, I can still hear you, just, that's all right, keep going.
Okay, so we gave opportunities as much as we could to young lawyers because we thought that A, they had earned it, and B, you know, if they had one or two witnesses, they were going to work really hard for those one or two witnesses and knock it out of the park. And they would know everything, every pitfall for that witness. They would know exactly what type of evidence to elicit that, you know, worked with the theme. And
Thank you, man.
Prepare that witness for cross-examination. So I think they did a phenomenal job, and that was important to me, is to have a young team looking at this from different perspectives. And yet Ben is correct. We all believed Johnny. That was the one requirement, right? And it goes without saying that that was incredibly important in this case. And we did. We all believed him. We believed that he did not do this, and he was, in fact, the victim of domestic violence. And we just needed to convince this jury that that was the case.
And by the way, one of the most important precepts of taking on any case is you have to believe your client's story. You're going to be able to do a much better job if you believe your client. And they did, and they won.
Oh, thank you. So Ben, you mentioned, you know, a little bit about if you got the same type of case, you do things differently. What do you think you would do differently?
Well, I think I think we probably would have gotten more of these great young lawyers involved earlier. I agree with Camille. I think they did a phenomenal job. I think it was more interesting for the jury to see different lawyers do different things. I think the judge appreciated it because it was, judges, as you know, tend to like younger lawyers. They don't want to just see the two partners, you know, getting up and snapping their fingers and asking for documents. I mean, that's not the way this team was. And I think it came across well. So one of the things I think I'd do differently is to get those lawyers involved in depositions earlier, not just say scripting it out for Camille or Jessica or me, but to get involved earlier on. So that's one thing I would do the next time.
I really love the fact that he's all about building up young lawyers rather than just taking on as much work as he can for himself, because he's already got his career pretty much made, you know, for the most part. Sure, he will represent several more celebrities, but he's a made man. It's really, really nice how generous he is in levying work to younger lawyers to be able to ride the coattails, because they have their whole future ahead of them. They may have another, you know, 20, 30, 40-year career in front of them. And Ben, in his graciousness, I mean, this man is so kind, you know, allows younger lawyers to become up-and-coming future warriors and gladiators. By the way, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Back to the interview.
Okay. Is there, Ben, then Camille, is there something in the trial process, in the trial prep process up until trial, is there anything that you, about that you hate? Like there's just one thing you just do not like when you have to prepare?
Maybe Camille could go first while I think about that. Great question.
Can you hear me first
Yes.
of all? Yes.
I can hear you.
Good. Okay, great. There's something that I don't like about the process, the trial process.
Yeah, like just of all the things that we have to do, is there one thing you're like, okay, somebody else do that? That's the one thing I really don't like to do.
Oh yeah, discovery. It's the worst.
Really?
Yes, I agree.
Discovery and discovery disputes. It's the worst. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that you'll find a lawyer that says, "Oh, I love meeting conferring with the other side. I love writing discovery motion."
The reason she says that, by the way, is because discovery is the most contentious part of the trial, because you literally have to ask the other side and be like, hey, I need this document. Can you give me this document? And they're like, no. All right, let's go to the judge. Okay, I'll give you the document. Where is it? I don't know. It's on the way. All right, let's go ask the judge. Wait. And it's just like this constant annoying back and forth. Welcome, Rita, as a new member. Thank you.
Yeah, I give you that. I don't
so
love
agree with
discovery
her.
motions. I really do love discovery. I'm weird that way.
What
I
is
like
wrong
discovery a
with
lot.
you, man?
I would say deposition designations, and I exercised prerogative as the old guy on the team that I had. I asked Camille to supervise the young attorneys to argue the deposition designations. And in this case, and I don't know, I don't really know how it works so well in California, but in Virginia, usually the judges don't give a lot of their own time to that and expect the lawyers to work it out among themselves, and they give it short shrift. In this case, the chief judge gave us a lot of time, so she would reserve each Friday, because virtually all of Ms. Heard's witnesses, other than her experts and her sister, were done by deposition.
Yeah.
So it was a big part of her case, less so of our case. So it was very important. These were crucial battles that were played out every Friday, because Friday was an off day of trial. And that's something that I found tedious and really required a lot of attention. And Camille and the young lawyers really fought it out tooth and nail. And it was really important. And I think that was, if not dispositive, I think that was really important because, and this was kind of a dominant theme, they really had two lawyers doing almost everything.
Thank you, Bobby.
They had a team of competent lawyers. They had lawyers who could have done more. But for whatever reason, and maybe it was a client imperative, we don't know.
Thank you, Brenda.
It was pretty much just
Welcome.
the two of them. And they both were very good, but they were getting worn around the edges. And it showed. I mean, not in closing. Of course, you're going to have your energy for the closing and the opening and the big witnesses like, Amber and Johnny. But at things like deposition excerpts, the partners were kind of made fun of me when I was just bringing sandwiches to the team when they would do those arguments. But I think they envied me by the end of the process, because for me, it was kind of a day off. And that's something I found tedious, but I think they did much better than I would have done. So I think it's really important to utilize the team you've got.
Absolutely.
And they want to do it, and they will rise to the occasion. If you've chosen wisely, they will rise to the occasion.
I absolutely agree, by the way. Welcome, Tyrannus. Welcome, Bobby. Thank you, Bobby, again. I'm sorry. I absolutely agree. Myself, as an owner of a law firm, I can tell you that building the right team is essential to having a good running business. And it requires some upkeep, but I try to delegate as much of my stuff as I can. And I can't tell you, with the right team, anything is possible. I mean, look at Camille and Ben. Prime example. Prime.
It looks like all of yours did, really. You guys had an impressive team.
Exactly. I agree.
Camille,
Obama.
What's the funniest thing that ever happened in a courtroom?
In the courtroom?
Not necessarily just this trial, but in a courtroom, what's the funniest thing that happened?
Oh, well, I think this trial had a lot of examples of that. I mean, everything from Johnny using his sense of humor and showing everyone his legal knowledge. He would object to questions before we would, or he would say, "Oh gosh, what I'm about to say is that must be hearsay." I mean, there were some really funny moments. There were some interesting witnesses, not to name any names, but there was one in particular, the other side, an expert that was bizarre.
Are you talking about Dr. Spiegel? Is that who you're talking about, Mr. Spiegel? Oh, sorry, my dog is trying to get it. Even she's like, I do not like that name. Right, Beatty? Oh my God. Are you talking about Dr. Spiegel, Camille? Because I'm pretty sure you are.
And comical, but
comical, definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
there were some really funny moments.
Oh
and
my
of course,
goodness.
some inside
Whoa.
jokes.
Thank you so much, Dazai. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the $50 dono. Holy shit. Haven't been here for a bit, but I still adore and love your content. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
That we all shared. I mean,
Right.
I'll let Ben share this one.
I love you too.
Ben, we got a mascot, right? That was our team mascot. And let's just put it this way. Our team mascot infiltrated the other side's closing arguments.
Ben,
I'll
Ben,
let Ben explain that though.
please, I gotta know what that's about.
Well, the alpaca, shortly after the op-ed, Ms. Heard's op-ed was published, Disney let it be known that they were dismissing him from Pirates of the Caribbean. A reporter called Johnny or accosted him and said, would you ever come back to Disney if they apologized to you? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, not for $200 million and 100 million alpacas. So one of his fans each day brought to trial, didn't get into the courtroom, but outside the courtroom brought 2 comfort alpacas.
Yep.
Now, I never knew that there was such a thing as a comfort alpaca, but apparently there are.
I'm just learning that now. So
it was.
I took a photo with them. I know. I saw them.
It became the mascot of the trial.
So great.
And someone gave me a miniature alpaca, which I ended up, I had in my pocket during an argument. And the judge's senior law clerk said to me during the break, you know, you had an alpaca in your pocket. Said to her, I hope you didn't rat me out to your boss. And she said, I didn't, but you really should be careful next time. So what Camille was alluding to is we had,
I see how that
closing
can be
argument, the way the courtroom was situated, there was an enormous lectern that was about a mile away from the jury. And I had used that for opening because I didn't have Camille's courage. Camille went right in front of the jury, which is the way you're supposed to do it. But I knew that that was not workable for closing, which we were going to split. And because we were so busy, we couldn't memorize the closing. We had the dilemma. Do we want to be before the jury just with a big stack of notes, which is kind of awkward, or do we want to seek protection behind the big podium, which would look like we were afraid and not believing in ourselves. So
yes. Okay, let me just stop right there. This is absolutely crucial because I, as a trial attorney, can tell you guys what he is talking about can sometimes make or break a case. Back in the day, when I used to do closings, sometimes I would have to stand behind the podium and read, just like they were doing during the trial. Obviously, my trials usually last about a day. This trial lasted 6 whole weeks. You have, as Ben and Camille are going through volumes and volumes and volumes of information that you can't remember everything. You have so many witnesses. You have so many facts. You have so much stuff that you have to keep in your brain. What he's talking about is the ability to, again, storytell, convey a story to a jury, to be able to make it cohesive. Notice how he used the word confident in our case, confident in our story. Because when you're hiding behind the podium, what he's alluding to is when you stand behind the podium, it gives the impression that you don't know your case, that you're not familiar enough with your case. But I don't think it backfired in this case. Clearly, they won again. But this one fact in and of itself, I mean, can it make or break a case? Sure. A smaller one, maybe, if you're so disjointed and uncomfortable. But they had so much stuff. I think it was completely impossible to keep it all in your head, personally. So what they did, I think, was absolutely the right call. They did it correctly. And I wouldn't have done it any other way if I were in their shoes.
I found a tiny little podium that had belonged to my mother. It was an encyclopedia holder. So I found that, I brought it in, and I put the little alpaca in the little drawer for good luck. So Camille and I both used the podium to our great advantage. And then, unfortunately, one of Miss Heard's lead counsel, Ben Rottenborn, he took advantage of it. Before I could take the podium away and force him to make that Hobson's choice, he seized the podium. And to my horror, he used it to great effect. And to throw him off during a break, I said, there's an alpaca in there. And he gave me stink eye. So we had a little humor there.
Okay. Ben, I swear to God, this man is the master of psychological games. Remember, I tweeted about this at one of the days, I think it was the last week of the trial, when they were getting ready to put Kate Moss on the witness stand via Zoom. He came up, he had a bag of candy he had a bag of candy. Remember the candies he would munch on? And he walked over to council table and he poured a little bit of candy on their table, like, here you go. And then he gave some to the clerk, I believe, or he just gave candy around. But most importantly, he gave candy to opposing counsel. He's the master of psychological games. This guy knows this game better than anyone I've ever seen. And the fact that he brought a podium, I had no idea that he brought his own podium, his grandmother's podium, from his own home, presumably, or whatever, her home, and he used it in order to have as little like physical material between him and the jury. First of all, brilliant. Again, I understand completely what he's trying to accomplish there, as you guys can see. But at the same time, the alpaca, first of all, lovely, right? Good luck charm. That's just psychological again, just a little bit. And then when the trying to revoke this masterful material advantage from the opposing team. So when Ben Rottenborg gets up there and he's like, yoink, oh, not enough time. Didn't yoink it in time. Okay, now he gets to use it. All right. No problem. I'm going to mess him up during the break. Oh, by the way, did you know that you've been using a podium with a fucking alpaca in the drawer this entire time? Yeah, that's right. Eat shit, motherfucker. Go ahead. Keep using it. Like, it's all yours. There's no looking back now. So I swear to God, Ben Chu is this. There's a lot more layers to being an attorney. Okay. And this guy is a jack of all of them, jack of all trades of all of them.
But as Camille said, there were a lot of, Johnny had some great lines in his direct that we hadn't anticipated, that were just quite, when the other side would say, well, did I read that correctly? He would really undercut it by saying, you read that quite well, Mr. Rottenborg.
You're an excellent reader of words.
He was able to disarm opposing counsel without being snarky or without being disrespectful, which, as you know, is not what you want your witnesses to be.
Yeah, he's, it's funny. I thought of the two of them. They're both actors, right? I was watching, she would look at the jury in a way. I don't know if that was something that someone had told her that she should do, because sometimes that actually works if you look at the jury. But the way she did it did not seem to resonate to me, and I wondered if it resonated with the jury. But that's all these different little strategies you mentioned.
You're not alone, Obama.
Camille, and did I read that right? Camille said that a lot. Every time she said it, it sounded sincere. And I don't know if the other side was trying to use that to use her strategy for themselves. But it's funny, and again, same thing. You said you wanted to use the podium further away. She wanted to use the podium closer. All those little strategy points are, I think, what makes a really good trial lawyer, because you have to know you can't do the exact same thing that someone else does. It doesn't work. You have to find your own, what makes you you, and then give that to the jury.
You can't pretend. It doesn't work.
Do you see that yourself, Ben?
Yeah. Oh, I think, Tony, that is spot on. I think that is such a great practice point.
Yep.
Because you can't emulate somebody else. You can pick up certain things. Oh, Tony did this really well. I can try to fold that in, but I couldn't possibly be you. And we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. And I completely agree. And that goes for the younger attorneys as well. They're going to do things a little differently than you do.
Yes.
And that's probably a good thing.
That's fine.
The jury is seeing different things. And we tried to do that in terms of subjects, for example, for closing. Camille had done what I think was just an outstanding cross-examination of Ms. Heard. And I think,
totally
of course,
agree.
I'm biased, but I think she came across as not mean and not trying to vilify her, but just using her own words and getting her to explain that. So we thought, for example, in closing, Camille had handled Amber, and she should address, those points. And for me, my job in closing was to try to explain to the jury what Johnny had lost. And he's a lot younger looking than I am and a lot better looking, but we're about the same age. And I can't pretend that I understand his life, but I've had some experiences common to him. And I can imagine, at least in part, what it would be like at his age to lose a career.
Yeah.
And to have his children have to, they never believed it. It's not like they believed their dad was a bad guy or done any of these things, but to have their children have to go through life
Devastating.
with this stigma. So it was my job to try to convey that in closing to the jury. So I was less kind of focused on some of these gotcha points. And it's more than gotcha. I mean, you know, the
Sure.
merits, as it were, but to try to put it in terms, not in dollars and cents, but what this man had lost.
Exactly,
And
Gina.
what was at stake for him,
So
which
true.
was to get his life back.
Yeah.
Right.
So we gave that a lot
get
of
his
thought,
life back.
and I think Camille could have handled that, beautifully, but we were trying to figure out which one of us would handle certain things better.
Thank you. So Camille, in terms of how you connect with a witness, have you ever had a witness or someone you really couldn't connect with, Camille, that you really kind of had to try to find your footing? Maybe they were much older than you or for a different background?
Of course, I think that's part of being a trial lawyer, right? I think it's you have to adjust, right? You have to course
Yeah.
correct. I think that something that gave us an advantage in this case was, oh, you guys can't hear me. I'm getting lost sound.
I can hear you, but I can't hear you as well as I.
Okay. I might switch to audio on my phone if that's
Okay.
easier, but
Okay.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just answer this question and then I'll switch to
Yeah.
audio on my phone. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
this
No
computer
problem.
needs
Just
a-
like course correct, we'll work with it.
Yeah, we're course correcting. So what I was saying is I think something that gave us an advantage was we had a really interesting deep bench of attorneys that we could pull from. And my job really was to try to put certain witnesses with certain attorneys. And it was about chemistry. And it was about
Chemistry, so true.
making sure that they had something that made sense. And that's why I put certain attorneys with certain witnesses.
Yep.
And for me, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did the cross-examination of Amber Heard's orthopedic surgeon that opined on the cause of Johnny's finger injury.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not, a distinguished doctor, and that's not my background. And we just talked about how science and math aren't necessarily my forte, but I focused in on, as a juror, right, not having necessarily a medical background. How can I explain this
To a layperson?
My point to the jury?
Yeah.
And
Very
I think that's
difficult
the best
sometimes.
way to do it. Yes, sometimes you're going to have a witness you can't find the right rhythm. You can't find anything in common with them. And it's about just focusing on, to me, what the jury is hearing and listening to and communicating that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add, Tony, that that's why you say you love discovery, and I do too. And that's
So
one of the
weird.
ways where you can kind of make that assessment. I mean, for example, we had 3 days of deposition of Ms. Heard, and she had 3 of Johnny, because Virginia doesn't have the 7-hour rule. So we negotiated a 3 days. So we also tag teamed it where Camille took 1 day, I took 2 days. And clearly Camille was much more effective eliciting information from Amber than I was.
You're
so
welcome, Rita. Thank you for joining.
To me, it wasn't a very difficult decision, which we collectively decided that Camille would be doing Ms. Heard at trial, because it was objectively clear that she was more effective with that particular witness.
And I think, by the way, that was the best decision that they've ever made, is to allow Camille Vasquez to cross-examine Amber Heard. I can't think of anyone who could have done a better job, honestly. Nobody.
If you have discovery, of course, you've got the luxury of doing a postmortem and looking in to see who elicited what. It's harder, obviously, on rebuttal witnesses where you haven't had the opportunity.
Exactly.
And one example to those of you who saw the trial, was the TMZ witness, the witness who
Morgan
came on,
Tremaine,
who testified to the effect that the paparazzi had been tipped off in advance of Ms. Heard's ex parte
by Ms.
TRO
Heard,
hearing,
cough, cough.
which was very a powerful testimony for Mr. Depp. And Ms. Heard's counsel hadn't had the luxury of taking his deposition. He was a rebuttal witness. So that's kind of an example, Tony, I think, of what you're talking about. And she's a very skilled attorney, but she had a world of trouble with that witness. And, he really got the best of her. There was one question where...
When you say a world of trouble with that witness, do you mean that the whole world saw the trouble that Morgan Tremaine put Elaine through, Ben? Is that what you were alluding to? Choice of words. That's a very interesting way of putting it. A world of trouble. Yeah, no doubt.
She accused him of, well, aren't you just appearing at this trial to have your 15 minutes of fame? And he turned it around and said, well, I could be saying the very same thing of you. So it goes to your point. You don't always hit it off with certain witnesses.
And I mean, he was masterful. That's what I was saying about intuition as an actor, I think. I mean, Camille had mentioned this, those exchanges about when he figured out what hearsay was. Those were really, I mean, those were genuinely funny moments. And it didn't come off snarky. It endeared him, I think, to I assume the jury, because it definitely endeared him to me, and I'm just watching from a distance. So, are you superstitious at all when it comes to trials, Ben?
Yes, and I was
Really?
very superstitious when I had a friend of mine who's a very senior lawyer in Washington, and he said, "You're winning," and I said, "No, don't say that. Don't you dare say that. We're playing from behind. We have no chance of winning this. No, I don't want to hear anything like that." And when anybody started to sound optimistic, I would turn the other way.
Camille, is Camille, are you back with us? Can you hear us, Camille? Well, we'll just wait for her. But Ben, so all right.
She's
so
reconnecting.
You're superstitious about that. Is there a type of law that you were also interested in and you didn't get to do? You went in this direction, but was there anything else pulling at you that you almost thought you were going to do?
Well, out of law school, I had the notion in my head that I wanted to be an international trade lawyer. I had visions of, crossing the globe and, kind of a James Bond lifestyle. But I actually practiced international law in Washington for some very nice people for about a year. And I realized it really wasn't. It was very technical. It wasn't really at all what I expected. And by luck, because I speak some Spanish, I was brought in as a very young associate to a case between Standard Fruit Company, a California company at the time.
I think he would actually make like a very, very great attorney in that field. But I think Ben would be really good in pretty much anything he does, honestly. But the fact that he is representing celebrities, I honestly think is his calling. He's just so good in the courtroom. He's like the best defense and the best offense that money can buy. And his skills are probably best suited for this type of work. I think he should stick with it. I think he will, especially now that he's already done it. He's earned like the public's eyes trust. I don't think there's any looking back now.
And the Sandinista government of Nicaragua. So that was really an exciting case. We got to go down to Nicaragua and take depositions of comandantes. And I thought, gosh, litigation's the way to go. I mean, you're traveling. It's exciting. There's a mild patina of danger without any real danger.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun. So I thought that was when I really got the litigation bug. I mean, I'd done moot court in law school, but
Once
I really wasn't committed
there's no looking back
to litigation until that. And I have really loved
Trust me, I know I've been bitten by the same bug.
it ever since.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can.
Yay.
Hey.
There we go.
So Camille, I'll ask you what I'd ask Ben. I see where you are, the type of practice that you have now. Was there something else pulling at you, or is there something else pulling at you? Another type of law that also captures your attention?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh no, we lost her video. Okay, but at least we have her audio. By the way, don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and welcome all new viewers and members.
I think a lot of things capture my attention, right? I mean, as a trial lawyer, both Ben and I really strive to be generalists. And, but obviously we're getting a lot of potential cases that are either defamation in nature or Me Too cases, if that's how you want to look at them. But I think that's something that's really true for both Ben and me is that, and our team, by the way, that is about due process, right? And it's almost, instead of anti-Me Too, it's what I would call maybe anti-cancel culture.
Hey, Joe.
And it's
Welcome
about,
back.
you know, making sure that there is an investigation and that there is due process before someone is canceled. And we take that really
my
seriously.
God, that is so important, to make sure that there is due process before someone is canceled. I mean, how many times have we seen a case of death by media where there is no due process whatsoever? Somebody says something about someone and then immediately their career perishes, right? Johnny Depp, Marilyn Manson, Kevin Spacey, Danny Masterson. We only have an answer to one of those four at this juncture. I'm going to be at the Danny Masterson trial, which starts next week. So that is going to be a doozy. I don't know what happened. We have 4 women that came forward, right? What does that mean? With Marilyn Manson, there are at least 2 women, if maybe a few more, that came forward. But all the stuff that we've seen and heard so far is not really working out. You know, Kevin Spacey, I know the least about. Johnny Depp has walked away free and clear because the truth prevailed. The truth set him free. Never be afraid of the truth, right? So at least we got 1 out of 4 resolved, and the rest will continue to remain a mystery until we get them resolved.
And I think Johnny's case was
So
an
crucial.
example of exactly that.
I agree.
So as journalists, you know, we're interested in a lot of cases, and we just want to do good trial work.
Nice. Camille, I'm going to pivot a little bit. I want to ask you about being Latina and being a woman in this profession. You know, as you can imagine, that
what are you doing, Obama?
You live the same in some of the same circles I do. A lot of people don't look like me when when I'm going to court. And the same can be said to you. How do you think the profession is holding up in terms of its ability to, add diversity, or at least invite diversity, and really kind of broaden the practice to a lot more different types of people?
Oh, thank you,
Well, I think it has to, right? And I think it's happening. It's a great time to be a woman. It's a great time to be a minority. Juries are diverse, and companies and individuals are realizing that they want different people that look more like their juries on their trial team.
Yeah. And
so I think it's a great time in the profession. Obviously, it hasn't historically always been as easy. But I do think that some advice that I give to especially women, right, young women, is you just have to prepare more. You have to be the most prepared person in the room.
100%.
You will be challenged.
Yes.
And you have to be able to have the confidence
to
respond.
Yes.
To do that, the way that I have found is through hard work.
Yes.
And being the most prepared person in that room.
100%. Yes.
I think that's good advice.
That's phenomenal advice,
If
Obama.
you had children, I don't think you do. Do you have children?
I do not.
Okay. If you had children, would you encourage them to become lawyers?
It depends on the child. I think, look, it's an
true.
incredibly
so
rewarding profession. And I, from a young age, I think I was meant to be a lawyer. I was meant to be an advocate. I have a funny story. I was young in elementary school, and I felt that the lunch ladies weren't being very nice to the kids. And I made it a point to call for a meeting with Miss Alice, who was the head of the lunch ladies, and try to mediate the some type of deal, right? Where we would behave better, but they would behave better towards us and not.
Wait a second. Camille has been litigating since elementary school. What? This girl, this woman was born for this. Holy shit.
Yell at us. And I thought
You
last
go, girl.
be a time of it shouldn't be stressful. And I was so stressed out going to that cafeteria because these lunch ladies were just yelling at these kids. And I just thought it was wrong. And so I had to stand up
Checks
and
out.
I called for a meeting, and they were actually really receptive. I mean, they probably thought I was ridiculous, like little 7-year-olds, but it was important to me that everyone treat each other with respect and not, be pejorative just because we were young kids. So I think I've always been a natural born advocate, and ever since I could speak, it was something that I was meant to do.
Wow, 7-year-old. Okay, interesting. So Ben, let's ask you the same question or something similar. When you were young, maybe 7, when do you remember your first examples of you advocating?
That was it.
I don't have anything
Ben.
as compelling as Camille's story, but I did do that, and now I'm worried about my own kids. I'm an older father. My kids are 10 and 11, and I was hoping that they would do something different. But my youngest was at overnight camp a few weeks ago, and he complained that he wasn't allowed to have seconds without eating his vegetables. So he started, like Camille, he started a movement at his camp called Kids Against Cantaloupe.
What?
Which was unsuccessful. Fruit and vegetables continued to be served, and it continued to be a condition before he got seconds. But now I'm worried that he's going to be a lawyer as well.
That's
okay,
funny. And
there's no doubt. If your kid starts a movement at like 10 or 11, or at least tries to, it doesn't matter that he failed. You know how many times I failed in my life? This is the one thing that I think Amber Heard supporters will never understand. Because when I posted my big L yesterday about not getting verified by Twitter, do you honestly think I didn't realize that this is a loss for me? Sure, I did. It's a loss. Who cares? Losses are going to happen. Don't be afraid of your losses. They are deathly afraid of losing and losses, and they try to hide them, and they come off as robots, machines, inhuman. In order to appear more human, don't be afraid to showcase your losses, because when you actually do get those wins are going to look a whole lot more powerful when the world knows that you have had 7 losses to lead up to that one win. Now that one win is so much more acute, so much more powerful, so much more stand outish than if all you do is post your victories and you hide and fear your losses. Never be afraid of losing, because losing is the best path to victory.
That's why I actually asked that question to Camille, because it's almost like to a person. Lawyers don't want their children to be lawyers. Tell me why that is, if you have an opinion on that, Ben.
I just think it's very hard profession. I really enjoy it myself, and I'm older, so it was a little easier when I was coming up, because in those days, if you were a good lawyer, meaning if you worked hard and you did everything right, you could have a pretty, well, again, that's coming from my background. My background's easier, not having been a minority. So I get that. But, and it was harder, obviously, for people of color and for women, when I was coming up, and still is. But I think it's harder now, in the sense, if you're talking about private practice, because now I think young lawyers, fairly or unfairly, are looked at to have a lot of business. And I don't know, as a 30-something lawyer, how many 30-somethings are in a position to have a lot of business because, their peers are not, general counsels, their peers are not yet higher in the corporate hierarchy. And I just think the pressures are I think it's not just enough to be a good lawyer. I think you have to be a good lawyer plus. So
Yes.
I think it's a harder life.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be a downer because I think it's still a great profession, and there are many opportunities.
But it's not easy.
Not just to go to a law firm. Many other ways to be a lawyer.
He's absolutely right.
I have friends of mine who are great judges, but I think it's hard. I think that's why maybe, Tony, some of us aren't encouraging our kids to go into that, because I think it's not so easy.
I would agree with that. I always tell people that if you're called to it, do it.
Yes.
If you're on the
absolutely.
fence, it's hard to do. If you
don't force yourself. I agree.
Did you learn anything from opposing counsel? And I don't mean anything like techniques, tactics, something you're not quite seen someone do before, or at least to good effect.
Oh, that's
if
cool,
not this
Sarah.
case. Can you think of a case where opposing counsel you really kind of learned something?
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I can tackle that, and then Camille will probably have a better answer. I've learned from. I remember early in my career, I had a case against an attorney who was not from the greatest schools, and he didn't seem to be as bright as some other attorneys, but he was very effective, and he won the case. He told corny jokes, but they were authentic. Kind of, Tony, it goes back to your point about being yourself. He was himself. He was very likable, and he may not have been quite as book smart as somebody else, but he was very likable, and he was very smart as to what was really important about the case. And by contrast, not naming names, I've seen attorneys who are very sharp, but who don't hesitate to show that. And they need to show that they're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
But that's not always the most effective attorney, as you know. My father told me something I'm not sure I learned, but he would look at me sometimes and say, "Ben, you need to learn the value of the unexpressed thought." And
wow.
That's, if you have it's good in your personal life too. You might have a comment that might be witty or something, you want to say to your wife, but it's just not a good idea.
And
I think that's true in the courtroom as well, that it's not necessarily who the smartest is or who the smartest thinks he is. It's you want to be human. And I've learned that from people in court, that sometimes you just need to let the jury or the judge make that final leap, and again, I think Camille did that a really nice job.
Yeah.
In the course of Ms. Heard's cross-examination. I don't think she tried to go for any knockout punch. She kind of made her point and moved on. And I think that's really important in cross-examination.
100%. Sorry to cut it off just real quick here, but I swear that is what makes her such a great cross-examiner and a great litigator. With Amber Heard, especially when Camille and Amber Heard were going head to head, Amber would have burned her so hard if Camille did not get in, get out. She's like a boxer, she comes in and she's like, whew, jab. And then as soon as Amber Heard tries to jab you, you don't go in to try and take the punch and then fight back. She's like, nope. Okay, now my turn again. Whew, punch again. She just gets in, punch, get out. Gets in, punch, get out. And that is the proper way to do a cross-examination. It doesn't matter what the answer is, as long as you get the right question out and you get the right the answer you want out of the witness. It may not always be the one you exactly want, but the closest you can get to it. And Camille did a phenomenal job with Amber Heard on the stand. Phenomenal job.
You don't want to make yourself unlikable.
That's true. Camille, same question. So have you, either in this trial or another one that you can think of, did you get to learn something from opposing counsel, something that you realized you might incorporate or at least be wary of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
That's
think
how she
that
earned
trial is
that
so
nickname.
unpredictable, and we
Exactly,
all know
Misha.
that as trial lawyers, right? And you have to be able to course correct. You have to be able to pivot. Not everything is going to go your way, and if there's something that I learned is you have to plan also for things not to go your way, so that you have a solution in place. You should think worst case scenario. You know, I'm going to get every objection. I'm going to deal with a witness that's going to be sympathetic. I'm going to, how do I handle that when that situation arises? And I think something that we did quite well as a team is we were able to pivot. And I'm not certain that the other side was so effective at that. And it really surprised me, if I'm being honest, that such experienced attorneys didn't seem to be able to course correct and pivot. But it's a lesson, I think, for all of us, because yes, the case went our way and the verdict speaks for itself and it was definitive. But you know, we had bad days too, and it's about how you course correct.
What would you say would have been was a bad day?
I think there were days where there was, you know, evidence coming in where Amber was putting on her case in chief, and we knew that the evidence was going to be contradictory to, you know, Mr. Depp's version of what occurred. And so it was tough to be able to help the client understand that this was just part of the process, right? It was tough to hear this evidence that we thought was false. And it's discouraging, right? And it was hard to get. We had one of our experts that wasn't allowed to testify. That was really disappointing for us. And, you know, but it's about how you deal with it and how you keep it moving forward and keep the client engaged, keep the client on the same page as you and understanding that this is just all part of the process.
Yep.
That's, I think, a good point. I think one of the things that and it happens more in your, you know, if you're a plaintiff's attorney, I think, at least it feels like it does. Clients don't know this process.
That's true.
And I find they get very frustrated when they're confronted with it, because again, that's why I say TV and movies do us a disservice.
Yeah.
Ben, how do you convey what is about to happen? Or, you know, when you have a client, you know, this was a very long trial. You know, Johnny's, you know, he's worldly and experienced, and he probably got it better than many others. But how do you prepare a client for this journey?
It was hard, and this case went on longer than most in Virginia because of COVID. We had the trial was delayed twice because of COVID, and once because our first chief judge retired, and that really caused a lot of frustration for Johnny. And I thought the whole discovery process was one long frustration, because we had to keep telling him, other than his deposition, and even at his deposition, just obviously answer the question you're asked. This isn't your time. You'll have a chance to tell your story. And I think it was enormously frustrating for him. His life had basically stopped professionally.
Yep.
Studios weren't returning agents' calls. He was living through
a nightmare,
hellish publicity.
Yep.
And his lawyers were saying, you can't do anything about it. So I think in that sense, the trial was paradoxically a bit of a release for him, because he knew that he was finally going to have an opportunity to speak. And I think
this is what every innocent client that I've ever represented wants, is a chance to speak the truth, to speak their mind, to tell their story, to get on that witness stand sometimes, and to tell the story of what it is, how everything happened. I can't tell you how personal everything that he just said was to me, because it is so true. And Johnny was experiencing the exact same thing. All he wanted was to tell his story. He just wanted the world to hear the truth, and he finally got it.
I think it was, he finally realized that we knew something about what we were talking about. Because some
pivotal point in representation.
And I've had this with other clients too, that during the discovery process, they kind of think you're just someone to whom they're paying bills.
True.
And as you say, they see it on TV. You know, I could do that. You know, I could ask those questions.
So
Tony's
true.
asking. But I think when they get to trial, it becomes a little more real for them.
Yes.
And when they see their attorneys functioning in a competent way, or relatively competent way, and what we told him is unfolding, I think it creates confidence in the client. And they begin to think, now I'm understanding what I was paying for. Now I know why they wanted to prepare me for so long. Now, you know, they see the sausage being made, and then they see how it comes out. And even though, as Camille said, and as you know, it doesn't always come out the way you want, it often does. It does enough that the client
it accomplishes the
is
goal.
happier than he was during discovery, I think.
Exactly.
Camille, I'm asking you this question because I've been practicing, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years, I don't know. And I know that it's starting to be, I can feel the difference from being a young lawyer to being a little bit more seasoned. And Camille, how do you handle, sometimes clients or witnesses, they size you up because of your age. And how do you deal with that? You know, even judges do it, opposing counsel does it. How do you handle that? Or do you feel like that's something you have to handle?
Use it to your advantage.
I
They don't
love
see you
to be
coming.
underestimated.
Yes.
Me too.
Yes.
I love it.
1,000 times yes.
You know, again, this goes back to over preparation, hard work, and just doing your job, right? I mean, look, we got a tremendous amount of recognition, but we just did our job.
Yep.
And we did it well. And, you know, I think that you earn the respect of your client by continuing to do your job, continuing to win, continuing to do a good job for him or her. And you sometimes get the opportunity to showcase that to the client or to the world in our case. But
no misheard. My question was,
it's nice to be underestimated,
classic.
And it just drives me.
I understand that. I totally
most
understand
definitely.
That. Ben, I'm going to ask you.
And this is, by the way, advice to all you young non-lawyers and lawyers out there. If you have some sort of like disadvantage that other people may perceive, turn it into your advantage. Use it to your advantage. I can't tell you how many times, me being a young attorney, just like Camille, I used it to my advantage. People did not see me coming. They're like, all right, this is just going to be a quick one and done. And you come out of left field, nobody's ready for that. Use it.
This question, I actually think I know Camille's answer. I think I heard it, although I'm going to ask her a second. Ben, when they do the movie, who do you want to play you?
Oh boy, here we go.
I think Judge.
Okay, if you say anything other than Ana de Armas for Camille Vasquez, I'm going to cry.
Reinhold.
Okay.
He's a goofy looking guy like me. No disrespect to him.
Wait, sorry.
I think Judge Reinhold.
Judge Reinhold.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
for him.
He's a goofy looking guy like me. No disrespect to him.
Ana de Armas.
But
please.
I think that would be the right guy.
Please.
I can see that. I can see that. Camille, I want to hear what you said. Just curious because I think I heard you answer the question. I'm curious if your answer is different.
Yeah, I mean, you know what's funny about this question is throughout the process, again, I'm spilling Ben's secrets, but Ben has a wicked sense of humor. It's part of the reason that I know I love working with him. But throughout this long case, you know, he would periodically send out emails to the team especially when we got new team members, being like, okay, casting for the Depp v. Heard case, you know, so-and-so is going to play Camille, so-and-so is going to play the new member of the team. And I'm trying to remember, I think only because Penelope Cruz is actually a good friend of Johnny's.
Okay.
I think Ben had recommended Penelope Cruz.
Okay.
When I was growing up, some people said I looked a bit like Eva Longoria. I mean, gosh, I'd be tickled pink to be represented by any of these, you know, beautiful, smart, captivating actresses. And gosh, I don't know.
That's a non-answer.
I think we're just about almost done. So
she didn't give an answer. She floated Penelope Cruz because of Johnny Depp. She floated Eva Longoria, but she didn't answer. She said, I don't know. So Ana de Armas is still on the table. I will take that. I will take that.
Let's talk to young lawyers. I mean, I know that at Beverly Hills Bar Association, one of the things that we always are trying to do is encourage young lawyers to become more involved.
Exactly, my dad.
Because that's the lifeblood.
Exactly.
I feel like it's the lifeblood of
Objection,
what we do, is to have young people come
unresponsive.
in, and you showcase that in this trial. So speak to young lawyers, young people
I
who
know.
maybe are thinking about becoming attorneys, or even just those in law school or just graduating law school. What advice would you tell them for the first, that they should focus on for, maybe the beginning of a career, or trying to start off a career like this?
Well, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of long hours.
Yes.
But it does pay off. I mean, there is no shortcuts, unfortunately, right? And it goes back to your question and the discussion we had about whether lawyers encourage their children to become lawyers. It's a hard profession, and it just
really
requires a lot of hard work. But I promise that it gets easier. I promise certain things start to make sense. And I think watching trials, take as many opportunities as you can if you want to be a trial lawyer, right? Go.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. Does it get easier? I want to say no. I really don't think so. I mean, maybe at certain level, but it's hard throughout, and it's hard in different, for different reasons. I mean, sure, you get to learn how to play the game better. You know how to do your legal research. Maybe you don't have to do the legal research yourself anymore. I don't know if I agree with that though. But I'm not in her shoes. So, by the way, don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.
To trials, sit in on trials, right?
Yes,
Watch
that I 100% agree. Watch
you
trials.
Will learn
yes.
so much. Sometimes you'll learn what not to do.
One of the reasons, by the way, I started my YouTube channel is because of that. I wanted to showcase other lawyers what law work should look like.
And sometimes you'll pick up something that you can say, I can do that, or I can do it better, right? But learn by observing other lawyers and how they do it. I mean, I'm so grateful that this young team of lawyers was able to have this experience, because I can't tell you how many of them came up to me, especially my more junior team members, that said, I now understand why you said, we needed to object to this interrogatory request, or I now understand why we argued so hard for this discovery. And it all kind of comes together at trial. Yeah. So my best piece of advice is work hard. It will get easier. Things will start to click and make sense.
Okay.
But there are really no shortcuts.
I think she's talking about the general practice of law starts to become starts to make sense. I agree with. But because it's not new anymore in that sense. But the actual profession never gets easier.
For this is a tough profession.
It's always
requires
tough. There it is.
Blood, sweat, and tears, unfortunately.
There it is. Literally what I just said.
Good advice. Ben, same thing to you. To young attorneys or those who are thinking about coming into the profession, what advice would you have for them?
I would echo what Camille
Mira,
said, and also to use any opportunity to get into court and to get into depositions. For me, I use pro bono because the firm I started out with, and Brown Rudnick has a strong commitment to pro bono. As a young lawyer, it's a great opportunity to get more responsibility early, because just a fact of life in a landlord-tenant case, Catholic Charities case, you're not going to have 6 lawyers on it unless it's a big case. It's going to be a young associate, maybe lightly supervised by a partner. And I think it's a great opportunity to get into court earlier. Is pro bono, I think, is a great way to do that. It's not that the case is less important. To the contrary, it's probably more important.
Probably the most important case you'll ever do.
The reality is younger lawyers get more of an opportunity. And going back to
launches your career.
Those younger lawyers are going to do a hell of a job because they're scared to death.
Yes.
And I remember my very first case was a child custody case before a Superior Court judge, Judge Sullivan, and he wrote us hard. And we both grew up. I mean, Judge Sullivan ended up being a federal judge, and he ended up doing a lot of the huge cases you're familiar with. And it's a great way to cut your teeth.
Mhm.
And once you've done a trial, a pro bono trial, or big hearings, you're not scared. I mean,
No, that's so true.
and I find, and I get off my soapbox, but there are a lot of people, even at big firms that who make a lot of money, who didn't take the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so they find themselves as middle-aged and even older lawyers, and they're scared to death of the courtroom because
That's the
they
worst.
never did it when they were young, and it's too late to go back. If you're 45 years old.
And we know exactly who those lawyers are, by the way. Like amongst ourselves, lawyers know who the litigators are. So Ben is 100% spot on.
And you've only been at one trial, it just doesn't work. So I would just say, seize the day, get
Carpe
involved
diem.
in these cases, go to the partner and say, or go to a partner you admire and say, look, I really want to work with you. Of course, I'll do the document review, I'll do the scut work. But even some people who aren't that nice, they see you working really hard.
Yes.
They're going to give you an opportunity. They're like, okay, I've seen you work that hard. You can take a deposition. So it'd be pro bono would be one thing. And then just really, as you all were saying, throw yourself into it.
Yeah,
and
throw
ask
yourself
for
to the wolves.
opportunity.
Trial by fire.
Because it's not about money when you're young.
Absolutely.
There'll be money later on. Just
Yes.
get the experience.
Yes.
And one of the things I learned quickly is that
So well
it
said.
was great when I went to hearings for the first time. I realized, oh wow, everybody's behind me. You don't really see the people except for you're just talking to the judge. So it's not as daunting as you might think.
It's really
I
not.
could do this all day. Thank you so much to Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez for joining us. This is the very first
This
lunch
has been
with,
awesome.
and I really thank both of you. You really had a great conversation. Thank you so much. I'm Tony Ross, president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Next
Thank you,
time, I'll see
Obama.
you. Bye.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ben.
Tony.
Thanks, Camille. This has been awesome. That's been so much fun. Wow, what a great bunch. Let me tell you, that was absolutely so much fun. Such a pleasure to watch these two. I swear, and especially when they start talking about the trial, you just get mesmerized by how much truth they spew, like how much they're enamored with the work that they do. That's what a lawyer should be about. Like Elaine Bredehoft, when she did all those interviews post-trial, even though she lost, she took a big L, nothing stops you from actually trying and being like a good person and being true to your craft, even after all of that is done. But she failed to do that with flying colors. Let me get through some of these super chats real quick. Rita Joe says, as a paralegal currently in discovery hell, I echo this. Good teams matter. Good paralegals are just as important as the lawyers, if not more, 100%. Got to have a good team. Otherwise, you're in it for the long haul and you're going to lose, and you're going to, or you're going to win, but you're still going to have a terrible, tough job doing it. Thank you for the super sticker, Gina. Thank you, Bobby, for the super sticker. Alpacas, Morgan Tremaine, your reaction to that zinger thrown at Elaine by Morgan Tremaine, classic. Absolutely, IDSW. I agree. Such a great story, Janice Driver. Absolutely. Johnny GTO, Ben Chu equals the top G unit in the house. Thank you for the sticker, Bill Atwall. Thank you, Joe, future bird watcher, ready to add any context for you, huh? Love that. Mary Lowly Medina, super sticker. Thank you for the super sticker. Tyler McCord just said, McCounselor. Thank you so much, sir. And Carla Salza should play Camille, says Lisa. I don't know. Do I know who that is? I don't know if I know who that is. TBH, to be honest. I don't think I missed any. I just received a couple more. Rita says, gracias, Larry. My name in Spanish, by the way, is Lorenzo. Lorenzo en español. That was my name during Spanish class. And 50,000 IDRs. What currency is that? I'm not sure, but that's awesome. Thank you for the donation. Thank you for the super sticker. All right, you guys. Thank you all so much for joining me. I had so much fun doing this. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you in the next video. I love every single one of you. Bye, you guys.